in around June 1985. And just to even take some words from the UK per se, the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab, he says that the agreement between the UK and China made clear that Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy, rights, and freedoms would remain unchanged for 50 years since the official handover in 1997. So something like the national security law, I don't think should be allowed to even happen up until 2047. In my understanding, the very language of the security law infringes against Hong Kong's one country, two systems policy. We've heard of how the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party ruled Chinese government, have arrested and have a practice of arresting and persecuting mainland Chinese critical of the Chinese government, and even crackdowns on religious and ethnic groups. They are implementing the same legal language in the national security law in Hong Kong that they have used to arrest these groups in China: secession, extremism, subversion, treason, etc., etc. How this kind of ties back to us with the national security law is, first of all, we do have 300,000 Canadians living in Hong Kong, and the sad part is that the national security law also includes Article 38, which includes the offenses also applies to person from outside the region by a person who is not a permanent resident of the region. So it doesn't have to be a local citizen of Hong Kong that is that would succumb to this law, but also uh, international or foreigners as well. In some way, this concerns the safety of our people now in and out of Hong Kong. So for months, we've heard lots of statements from our government officials, lots of talks of deep concerns and closely monitoring the situation of Hong Kong, and a lot of urges from the government to Chinese officials to back down on national security law. The law is already here. It's time to stop urging and start to face the reality that the law is here. It's infringing on international laws, and we need to take that deep concern a step further and turn it into plausible, tangible action. I guess, for example, we have the Interparliamentary Alliance in China. The U.S. has started imposing sanctions. I know we did in Canada. We let go of our extradition agreement with Hong Kong. But what else can we do to protect the safety of our Canadians in Hong Kong, and also those who share our values, democratic values in Hong Kong? So, in conclusion, I do call on other Canadians, Hong Kongers or from Hong Kong or not, to please support this petition. Thank you.
My fellow Canadians, by forcing this new security law on the people of Hong Kong, China has stripped away all their human rights, destroyed the rule of law there, and reneged on their international obligation to give Hong Kong democracy. Beijing is now imposing on the people of Hong Kong its own totalitarian regime, where torture is standard practice, where there's mass surveillance of everyone, where there's no civil or legal rights, no religious freedom, no freedom of speech, where the conviction rate in the courts are 99.9%. Now, we Canadians might feel rather distant from all this, or we may feel uncomfortable at the prospect of getting involved in case we might get in trouble. My friends, Canada must do something because it's already our issue. We're already involved. The People's Republic of China has already taken aggressive and hostile measures against Canadians. Just to ask the two Michaels, imprisoned and tortured for doing nothing. You can ask the Garretts, a Canadian couple doing charity work there for 30 years, and then suddenly in 2014, imprisoned and mistreated for 775 days. We're already the victims of their trade war. So it's not just a Hong Kong issue. It's now a Canadian issue because the new security law says it has force in effect even on Canadians in Canada. So, for example, if we speak out, even in Canada, we are deemed to have violated their law. That law purports to restrict our freedom of speech and our freedom of thought right here on Canadian soil. My fellow Canadians, we're all implicated. We are all threatened. So in the face of this overweening aggression and human rights violation, let's be Canadians and stand up for the victims of injustice. We must speak for those who are now being silenced. We must stand up for those who are now being downtrodden. Now, you might ask, why should ordinary Canadians like you and I, who have little to do or no connection with Hong Kong, why should we care? Canada must stand up for human rights. If we don't stand up for the human rights of Hong Kongers, who will? If we don't stand up for their human rights, who will stand up for ours when it's our turn? The great Cardinal Zen, the retired Bishop of Hong Kong, says, when Hong Kong loses its freedom, the church will not be spared either. And when the church loses its freedom, it can no longer defend Hong Kong's freedom. He says he's there waiting to be arrested. He cites the Bible, which says, hate evil, love good, maintain justice in the courts. And also, the Bible tells us, let justice roll on like a river and righteousness like a never failing stream. My fellow Canadians, let me just close with the words of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Thank you.
Petition 2640 was initiated by Carlo Puche, and he sought my sponsorship for this e-petition. The petition is to request citizens of Canada, the Canadian government, to join the international coalition and impose appropriate sanctions against China. In the past year, I guess many people had already, many Canadians have already observed what happened in Hong Kong. But I would like to highlight why we as Canadians would want to pay attention to something that is happening thousands of kilometers away. Canada and Canadians, we have vested interest in Hong Kong. In Saiwan Military Cemetery, we have Canadian soldiers buried there. They sacrificed their lives to defend Hong Kong during the Second World War. We, as a country, we were sought to support and witness the signing of the Sino-British Joint Declarations in the 80s. Our Prime Minister had inquired with both China and United Kingdom in their guarantees of Hong Kong stability and people's protection. That was in the past. Canadians, we also have many Canadians who were born in Hong Kong. They are Hong Kongers living in Canada. It's been estimated that over 500,000 of Canadians share the ancestry, or their descendants from Hong Kong. And currently in Hong Kong, we have an estimated over 300,000 Canadian passport holders living in Hong Kong. So what happened in Hong Kong today, not just in the past, matters to Canada a lot. And not to mention, of course, there are Canadian business interests. In order to do business, the free flowing of information, the freedom of press, all these freedoms matter. And Hong Kong, it's Canada's second largest destination for foreign direct investment in Asia after mainland China. And so when Hong Kong, it's imposed of this national security law by the Central People's Republic government of China government, it is very concerning, to say the least, and it actually could hurt the very character why Hong Kong is such a successful financial center in the world. I used to be a software development management position, and when we do software and when we deal with business with the US and EU and all these free countries, we have to abide by, for example, many of the data protection laws and regulation. Let me just use the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, as an example to highlight what countries or what businesses are going to be facing the trouble with regard to the national security law. And this is exactly why, without the ability to protect users' data, when they are subjugated to all these government interference, operations of huge multi-international giants like Google or even TikTok are expressing very much concern whether they could continue to operate in countries in Hong Kong. And so after much consideration, my office has decided to offer my sponsorship to Mr. Puche in this e-petition. And I frankly have to say that I am pleasantly surprised that within a short 2-3 weeks of times, we have collected close to 4,000 signatures, verified Canadian signatures to date. And these are all testament to how much of a concern Canadians in general have, and the effort of Mr. Puche and Father Sue has put together. And I'm here as a facilitator, and I appreciate for your concern. We will continue to monitor the situation and will deliver your voice and your wishes to the Canadian government as you demand. Thank you.